Welcome to part 1 of 5 in a series about Dabin's Wild Youth acoustic EP. Wild Youth dropped on August 12th, and the video premiered at 12 p.m. EST. Upon listening to these 5 songs, alongside the video, I realized that it was telling us a story. I'm still not really sure if the story was obvious or not, but I'm here to tell it anyway. As I started looking into the story, I realized that the full-length Wild Youth album is also telling a story, and I'll probably get to analyzing that at a different date, but right now I'm just going to talk about the 5 songs on Wild Youth acoustic EP. The lyric videos give us a little glimpse into the story. As I'm giving this analysis, I'll likely use clips from that to tell bits of the story, but generally I'll be mostly sticking to the lyrics. I also want to point out that I wrote up my 5-part analysis before I got to see anything that the artist really talked about the lyrics, and in part 3 I will talk a bit about Essinger's meaning behind home, so keep an eye out for that. So in this video, in part 1 of this series, I'm going to be going over the overall story outline as well as Lights, which is the first track on this EP. Alright, here we go. I'd like to first start out by letting you know about the framing that I use in a lot of my different analyses, because this may be the first time you're listening or reading anything that I've analyzed before. Generally, I'm drawn to songs that I can apply to my own life, so you'll likely see this as we go through this analysis. What I take away from this story will probably look different than what you take away. I feel like this is one of the many beautiful aspects of music. We all get to take what we need from songs, and sometimes that'll change based on where we are in life. I've mentioned this before in other writing and videos, but generally a lot of the pieces that I take away from music are important on my healing process of PTSD, so that may come up a little bit in the themes, but I don't want that to be the main focus of this analysis, because I feel like it can be applied for anyone. It just has been helpful in that capacity as well. Just keep that in mind as you're going through this, because I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or triggered in any of these topics. Alright, here we go. So, for the overall story summary, I find that a lot of music, including music on this EP, are generally viewed under the context of a relationship with like a partner or a lover, and I see that consistently with music, and it's very interesting to look at because if you go past that in a lot of different music, you can find messages buried underneath it, and I don't know exactly why they're always buried under these like loose concepts of love and whatnot, but I feel like part of that is because of that's what's popular, people like love songs and whatnot. But when we go under that, we can really see some different messaging that really doesn't have too much to do with love songs and like the general messages of love and whatnot anyway. I find that very interesting because you can see that across all genres. At surface level, a lot of love songs look like love songs, but then when you like dig deeper into them, there's a lot of messages that we can really take away, and it's one of my favorite parts about music. From start to finish, this EP takes me through a course of trying to balance different aspects of my life. I'll break down what that looks like in each track. So to start off with Lights, track 1, I find myself evaluating my past habits of ignoring what I'm feeling. When I look at Lights, I think back to times when I've allowed myself to keep fueling my bad habits, the ones that tell me to shut down my emotions so that I can preserve myself. In the song In Flames has me looking back on all the different elements of hurt that caused me to start shutting down in the first place. And then when we go to Home makes me realize that by shutting down my emotions, I ended up losing myself, feeling very disconnected and lacking direction. If we go to Bloom made me look at the part of my life where I was starting to feel whole again, but while I was feeling whole, I started becoming afraid of growth and challenge, out of fear that my life was falling apart and history would repeat itself. If I start challenging myself, then I'll probably get hurt again, and it's kind of a whole cycle right in there. But when we get to Alive takes me to a place where I start overcoming my fears, which enables myself to grow and start feeling alive. And I'd also like to mention there's a newly added lyric in the acoustic version that really drives that point home by affirming that Alive is where I am right now. So many emotions have been flowing through me as I worked through each song and each lyric. There's just so much here to unpack, part of why this is like 5 parts. Songs like Bloom truly did take me by surprise because I'd listened to that song over and over and over, and every time I listened to it, I viewed it in the context of a relationship and a blooming relationship, and it took until really listening to this EP in order for me to see beyond that, and as it fills that piece within the EP, there's definitely a whole new appreciation for the messages that I've found in that song, but at the same time, I still enjoyed my old views of that song because that in itself is also a nice context, but that one I won't really be getting into in part 4. I'll be talking more so about part it holds in this story. Also, a quick shout out to everyone who worked on this EP, 6 artists. Of course, Dabin is the producer of this EP, but we have guest vocals from Trove, Lexi Norton from Echoes, Essinger, Dia Frampton, and Run. Thank you all for participating in this album because it's amazing and you all brought your own unique take on this whole message, and I love that at the same time everyone has their own voice in this album, but you all come together to tell this amazing story, and I think that each piece is just so important, and it feels like the artists who brought those tracks to life really needed to be there to help bring this together, and I love that everyone was able to collaborate to tell this story. Another theme that I will talk about briefly on each track that came up as I was going through them is it seems like each track was a stage of grief. Don't know if that was intentional, but 5 tracks, 5 stages, and I will further break down each stage of grief in each part of the video, but that isn't the main theme I see throughout this. It's just kind of like a side theme, and I thought I would bring it up because it is kind of cool to see that other just little extra layer. So for this, they're in order. Lights is denial, In Flames is anger, Home is bargaining, Bloom is depression, and Alive is acceptance. Again, I'll break down each one at each part. Alright, so we are done the overall analysis. Now we're going to jump into Lights. We'll start with an overall summary of Lights, and then we'll go in and break down each lyric. So, Lights. For me, like most songs I analyze, this song is framed in the context of one part of me talking to the other. There's this one part of me that's just checked out, it just wants to ignore everything. This same part of me likes to shut down emotions and tries to power through life as effectively as possible. To this part of me, emotions are inconvenient, so we're just gonna keep powering through and, oh, you're upset, that's fine, but we're just gonna keep going because emotions are a nuisance. We don't need them. That's what this part's saying, that's their message. The other part of me is questioning the strategy. I mean, this part recognizes we've tried other ideas, we've tried other tactics, we've tried avoiding them, we've tried medicating them, I guess, and that didn't work, so that they're like, but is this the right solution? It seems to be working, but how, at what cost is it actually working? And this part is appearing to give in to the concept of emotion shutting down, but they don't really understand. This part is like questioning it, but they seem to have given in, but this part also doesn't really understand what the emotions are and why these emotions are hurting. It doesn't really understand emotions, so it's kind of just ingredients. If, oh, this other part of me doesn't want them, then I don't either, I guess, because I don't understand them anyway, so it's just, let's just keep going. And shutting them off is a solution, because now we don't have all of these, like, big questions about what they are, and we don't have these nuisances slowing us down from reaching our goals, so it's just no longer a problem. But in this song, we're reaching a point where that part that is questioning is beginning to really question if this is a way that we can actually sustain ourselves and live. Is this way of living actually livable? And in the song, it's referred to as home. Is this way of living home? Do we feel comfortable? Do we feel ourselves? We're trying to understand, but we keep getting caught up in our own high expectations of ourselves. This is kind of like why are you getting stuck on this emotion? We could just keep going and, you know, if we want to reach our goals, these are only slowing us down. We're trying to understand, like, we want to balance being able to understand our emotions and reaching our goals. And we're so caught up on our ideas of what we think our life is supposed to be that whole getting caught up in that is weighing us down and contributing to our overall state. There's so many different pressures in life that try to send us in a certain direction, and even internal pressure is trying to tell us a certain way to be. But as we kind of progress through the story, we realize that maybe those concepts and pressures aren't even real. Like, where did they come from? We kind of created them ourselves and then held ourselves to them, and that doesn't really work for anyone. And all of this chaos going on of trying to reach our goals and suppress all these emotions and figure out what they are while still suppressing them is just causing us to shut down. And that's what the line turning the lights out really means, is we're shutting down. So we can just, go into the darkness, ignore them all. The lights will be out. We won't even see it. We can just keep going, out of sight, out of mind. But when we turn those lights out, we're also turning out the lights of ourselves and, like, our soul and the light that's kind of keeping us going and keeping us thriving. So it's hard for us to even keep pushing forward to accomplish our goals when we're living in darkness, because that light is part of what drives us to keep going. But if we keep shutting everything out, we're in the dark and we're not thriving. We haven't figured out how to strategically turn the lights on and off, so all we do is shut them off. We can't be like, oh, well, we're excited about this new goal, so let's get going, let's turn those lights on, let's go. Look at how motivated and excited we are. Well, excitement is another emotion. So if we shut off the lights, that's one of the emotions we're also shutting off. So how do we get excited about new goals when we don't have that ability? And that's kind of realizing that that's a piece to life that we need to figure out. We can't just run from our emotions, because as much as we think that we can get rid of the negative ones and feed into like these positive mindsets, we can't, because the way that we put our emotions into the dark is all kind of the same, good or bad. We start to realize that maybe emotions aren't negative or positive, but that's kind of a whole other concept. As this is happening, the song mentions a lot like streetlights, and with streetlights, it's very interesting to hear, because if you think about streetlights, that's still a source of light, but streetlights aren't in our houses. They're on the street, they're outside, they're external. So because we haven't been making our own light, because we're shutting them all off, we end up getting these false senses of home because we see the street light out in the distance and we're like, hey, there's some light, and we're drawn to it because that's part of how humans are. We are drawn to light, so we're drawn to these street lights and we're like, oh, this street light here, this is making me feel something, this is making me happy, so maybe this is my home now. And that's kind of another concept this song brings up, of how instead of trying to fix our internal homes, we're just building new ones all around us and hoping that those will become our home, because we can just live in moments and we can live with people, and it doesn't work that way. But our mind, because we've been so deprived of light, thinks that that is the solution. And then I'll go into breaking down each lyric meaning.
I'm not sure why running away now feels right with you.
So, in this line, running away is referencing running away from our emotions, trying to keep them out, keep them away from us. I am asking myself why I think running away is the right course of action and why it feels right in this line.
'Cause God knows we tried numbing the pain, hiding away now. So I'll play pretend with you.
We're recognizing with this line that numbing the pain, likely through substance or minimizing or whatever that looks like for you or me, and hiding, which is different than suppressing, because with hiding, it's more so we're gonna remove ourselves from it, and then we're gonna eventually have to face it. But with suppression, it's like that doesn't even exist. We're not even like hiding in fear, it doesn't exist. There's a little bit of a difference between like hiding from emotions and suppressing them. Our new solution is to pretend it isn't there, and we're just gonna disconnect and check out, and it's not even there. We don't even need to bother hiding, because what are we hiding from? Nothing. If there's something to hide from, it's not there.
'Cause some nights I can't explain the way I feel, the way I'm wired.
Darkness makes it hard to really feel emotions, and when it comes to understanding what we're feeling, we're really in the dark about it. We're also in the dark because we don't understand how our emotions impact us or how we should handle them. Like with the line, the way I feel, the way I'm wired, I also like that it really touches on like this is kind of the way that our mind was wired to live. We can't really explain how it's wired, but these feelings and the way we're feeling and the way we're even pushing away our emotions is kind of how we've been wired to be. Like it's wired in us and we don't quite understand it yet, but recognizing that, you know, it's pretty deep in there. It's not just like at surface level, something we can change in an instant. It's like deeply wired in us. We can't explain it, but we're acknowledging it. And I think that that's also pretty important to point out.
You make things seem so clear, so we can leave the lights out.
By leaving the lights out, we get this false sense of clarity. We think that it's a good idea to leave the lights out because it's way more manageable. We feel like our head is clear, and it's definitely like a false sense of clarity, but we're kind of like, oh, like this feels fine. Why don't we just keep it this way? Like, everything's fine. And we're just gonna keep telling ourselves it's fine, and it kind of just creates this whole cycle because we're like, yep, we're fine. And then we can't even really detect if it wasn't fine, because if we're disconnecting everything, then if it weren't fine, it would be so disconnected we just wouldn't know.
And you're sick of questioning the weight that comes with every hour.
So asking questions about how we're living is adding more weight and damaging our vision of how we're supposed to be. You can feel it like taking its toll as you progress. And you know, it's like the one side of yourself trying to connect to the other through like this mutual feeling, which I find interesting because we're disconnected from our feelings. But, you know, the ones is like, you know, you're really sick of these emotions and like we have the solution, so why don't we just keep doing this? And then it's trying to like sway the other side to agree with you.
Street lights dim glow, keeping the time now. This feels like home.
As I mentioned in the summary, the streetlights give us a false sense of light. Streetlights feel like home. Well, streetlights aren't our homes. Streetlights are on the streets. Yes, the streetlights bring light. They may offer temporary warmth or light, but they're still disconnected from us. They're not an extension of us. They're in the background, in the distance. They're not ours. They're removed from our homes. And I mean, if you haven't caught on yet, our homes are ourself. And if we look at home, the lights are out. We grasp at the little light that peeks into our lives and we equate it to feeling alive. We see light, but in reality, this isn't us feeling alive. This is just external light. It's the light that will get us through because we can't produce our own light. And how are we supposed to grow if the only light we let in is from streetlights? If we don't have any light at home, we can't keep growing. Everything's dark. So we have to go to these external sources. And if you really think about it, it may seem faster in the beginning, but then you have to search for all of these different external sources. But if you had your own internal source, then you would just be going faster. Like, it would be way more productive, but we're not seeing that yet because we're seeing the instant, oh, okay, well, it's hard for us to produce light, so we'll just go find other light, and we keep looking for more and more light, and it seems like it's working, but we don't see yet that if we just produced our own, we wouldn't have to keep seeking out all this other light. We would just have to stay home and we could keep growing.
'Cause we're both tired of feeling nothing. We're done wandering around with our feet underground. Yeah. If I just keep close to you.
As I was editing the video, I got to this point in the song and realized I needed to change this entire section because I actually got the lyric wrong for this section. But I'm very glad that I caught this because now that I know the actual lyric, it's probably my favorite lyric in the whole song. This lyric really ties together this whole song, and it made me realize that at the end of the song, we're actually at a point where we do realize that by shutting down our emotions, it is taking a toll on us, and we've actually reached a point where we're aware and we're willing to make changes. We don't know how to do that yet, but we're willing to. You know, we're realizing that we can suppress these emotions, but they're still weighing us down. And as we're traveling from streetlight to streetlight, getting all these temporary sources of light, we start to notice that we're getting heavy because we aren't addressing all of the things we're suppressing, and they're really starting to push us down. If we visualize ourselves slowly being weighed down, we can see that right now it's just our feet that are underground. But if we keep living this way, we could keep sinking into the ground, into the darkness. I mean, if we want to think about this like morbidly, we probably aren't alive if we're completely underground. That's not the only concept this line delivers, though. I'll be talking about growth later in this series, but when I think about growth, I use a lot of plant imagery. In order to grow, we need light, but we also need to establish roots, and that's another element of our growth. If we frame this line in that context, we're also stating that we're frustrated with the process of growth. We are frustrated with how all of these heavy things are weighing us down. We find light, as we find these street lights, at our core it really does impact us, and as we absorb all these street lights, we start to become grounded in it. Like, we're so deeply rooted in it that our feet are in the ground. We're underground because that's how our roots are growing. So we're so much trying to live in these different environments. There is a positive to this, though. Because we've realized it, we realize it's not too late to stop the effects of us completely going underground. We need to get close to ourselves, and we need to become rooted in ourselves and have our own source of light, because then as we travel the streets, our roots won't attempt to just anchor us to these external elements. We'll be rooted in ourselves, and we can keep walking the streets without having to worry about our feet being in the ground. If we can connect with ourselves, we can start addressing all of these heavy elements that are stopping us from moving forward, and we don't have to get stuck in these moments because we're stuck in ourselves and we have our own place to grow. Alright, now we're getting into the stage of grief, denial. You may have picked up some of the denial I already mentioned, but just to recap, in this stage, we're denying quite a few things. We're denying that our way of living is destructive, that it's harming us. We're shutting down questions that could lead to our next stage of life, of our next goal, of anything. We're shutting down questions. We're just keep moving forward. Don't worry about any of that. We're denying, we think that our way of living is the best way. We're denying that there are even other ways. We're just, this is working. We think this is best for us, and we're denying any problems with this way of living. We're denying that the emotions we feel have value, even the good ones, because we're just shutting them all out. And we're denying the value of having our own light in our homes. Basically, we're just in complete denial mode. Well, that's all for this video. I hope that something I said resonates with you. If not, I appreciate you checking out this video. In the next one, we're gonna go into In Flames by Dabin and Lexi Norton. Be sure to check it out, and I'll see you in part 2. See ya!